The African Cup of Nations will be one very important tournament, especially in January, that would kick off for 2024. And today we've got our focus on the Bafana Bafana of South Africa. South Africa coach, he named a 23-man player list that would don their colours at the African Cup of Nations in Côte d'Ivoire 2023. The most notable absence was that of Burnley striker Lyle Foster. It is worth keeping in mind that he's spent time away from the Premier League side, citing, of course, a lot of league side problems, unspecified mental issues. Now, when Bruce was asked why Lyle was left out, he spoke to Burnley's head coach, Vincent Kompany, about how the player has been struggling, of course, how he truly feels. Injuries have dealt with Bafana Bafana a high blow, as earlier in the past month, Strasbourg forward Lebo Mothiba was also forced out of the African Cup of Nations reckoning after undergoing surgery for a fractured patella. In Foster and Mothiba, you have two players who play in what is considered to be 5 best league in Europe. Now, goal-shy Bafana will certainly miss the service of these two players. Let's not forget that Mayo also did not make it as well, despite scoring consistently in the Premiership over several seasons. The squad includes 10 Mamelodi Sundowns players who have been dominating the selection and starting lineup of Bafana in the past 6 months. And their experience on the continent, having recently won the inaugural African Football League title, will come, of course, in a great deal for coach Hugo Broos. There are only 3 overseas players in the team: Percy Tau from Al Ahly, Mahila Mayembela from Aris Limassol, and we've got Perfilo Sitole from Tondeli FC. Bafana are in Group E and will play against Mali, Namibia and Tunisia. They open their campaign on the 16th of January 2024 against Mali. Now, to join us in this conversation, we have been weighing the options, and a lot of questions are trailing that decision by Hugo Broos to name 23-man squad. We've got a football writer from Times Group, Marc Strydom, joining us on In the Game today. Thank you so much, Marc, for joining us on the show.
Hi, Onyinyechi. I think there's a little bit of a lag, but I'm sure it's fine. And thanks for having me as usual, and hello to the viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you, but we would go on with the conversation, come what may. At the publication of the 23-man squad list, what was your first reaction? Let me get that before we go into the deep conversation.
Yeah, I think there's always a few mixed feelings with the squad. Whenever a national team, a coach announces a squad, I think Onyinyechi, but there's a bit of talent in the squad. Like you say, I think the withdrawal from the squad for reasons beyond the coach Hugo Broos's control of Lebo Mothiba and Lyle Foster is a big blow to the competitiveness of this team. Lyle, I think it was the right decision for Lyle Foster to not be included. He's only come back from taking a break because of his mental issues at Burnley in the last few games. It's very sad for the squad that he can't be there for those reasons. I think it would have been unfair to try to force him to go to Afcon with his current struggles for game time, even at Burnley, and then rely on Lyle for goals. I think it would have put too much pressure on him at this stage of his career, and we really hope as South Africans that Lyle can Burnley scoring goals at the promoted team that was struggling.
Marc, if you see really from yesterday's game, Lyle did not look like one who is struggling mentally. He wasn't targeted yesterday, so you'd be wondering why he was missed in the squad list.
Yeah, and I see your point. No, absolutely. As someone who, and Vincent Kompany has certainly great faith in Lyle when he's not been out of the game because of his mental issues. He is the target man at Burnley, and that's interesting because when they got promoted last season, he kind of played a bit of a bit role, but he's come into his own. Yeah, I think if Bafana Bafana bomb out in the first round in this tournament, you're absolutely right. There's going to be questions asked of the decision to leave him out, and there's going to be questions asked of the closeness between Hugo Broos and his former player Vincent Kompany, who is the coach of Burnley. And they've reached agreements before where Lyle was left out of the squad. But that was for smaller games, for friendlies, and the agreement was that Lyle would come back for the bigger tournament, especially for Afcon and for the bigger games and the qualifiers. And now to see him left out, look, there's going to be a lot of questions asked. And yes, there are Lyle's issues in terms of mental issues. It's always like this at Afcon, isn't it? When a player is battling for some reason at his club, that the coach can even use that as an excuse, and that might be the question that's asked. If Bafana don't do well at this tournament, was it an excuse by Kompany? Did he use his close relationship with Broos for Lyle to not be there? Yeah, no, so I think you asked a very valid question. I think the blow that is to the squad and Mothiba, who's injured, is that unusually for Bafana Bafana, we actually had South Africa actually had a kind of a good attack for the first time in a long time, and it's what really has carried them to this tournament. And the attack remains quite good. You still got Percy Tau, who was the African local base player of the year, and who's done really well at Al Ahly in the last few months, in the last year especially, after struggling there initially. You've got the experience of Themba Zwane, Zakele Lapasa and Evidence Makgopa, the Pirates strikers, have not done so well at club level, but even when they don't do well at club level, they seem to score consistently in important games for Bafana. So there's still a bit of an attack there, but I think again, like you say, there's a question mark over Kanyisa Mayo, who's the top scorer in the PSL, not being in the squad. And Oswanapolis, who plays for Polokwane City, is there, who scored 4 goals. Kanyisa Mayo scored 7. So there are these strange decisions. It's, does the coach see something in Oswanapolis, who's not really earned a cap yet for Bafana? Does he see? I guess Hugo Broos must see something in him. The other, I think, big issue is the lack of star quality. Mothiba, Foster, Tau, and to some extent Themba Zwane, who's done very well for Sundowns continentally, are the big stars. 2 of those are gone, so it's reduced the real star quality to half. Another big question mark is defense, because if you look at South African teams in 2019, we had quite a good team defensively. It was quite a bit of a boring style of play, but it carried us through to the quarterfinals, where Nigerians will certainly remember it was quite a tight game. Nigeria only got their win in the 87th minute in the quarterfinal after we beat Egypt in the second round. And it was quite a defensive team. And at the moment, when we look at Sibisi, the Pirates player, and Kosinasi Sibisi at centre back, and Sianda Kulu and Motobi Mbala, the Sundowns centre back, there's a bit of a feeling that they're not the most stable centre back options. And then there's again a question mark over Rasheen Deriek, who's quite a very solid young centre back who's just come back from injury, but he's been playing again for Sundowns. And Rivaldo Coetzee, another one who's come back from injury, been playing for Sundowns, who plays in midfield but is also a centre back. And that they are not in the squad is a little bit of a question mark. There's a feeling the fullbacks are there's some good options there. Terence Mashego, the Sundowns player, a lot of Sundowns players in the squad, of course, because of their success. Khuliso Modao and Tapela Moreno is named as a midfielder. Those are good options out wide in defense.
Okay, Marc.
And I'm sorry I'm going on a bit. Yeah.
Okay, Marc, you've done a bit of a download there of the players who have been listed in 23-man squad, but I have a bit of concern here where he missed out some notable names, which you've mentioned already. But Coach Broos did try to justify not calling up Pyramid striker Reggie Lackey. He said that he's simply not good enough to be in the final squad. And I'm wondering, what is good enough to Coach Hugo Broos?
Yeah, I think that is an unfortunate statement. And this is what we have certainly experienced with Hugo Broos. He doesn't have too much of a filter in terms of things that he says. And I would disagree that Fahri Lackey is not good enough. I think in terms of, look, he hasn't necessarily banged in the goals at a high rate for Pyramids. But we certainly had a good look at Fakhri when he came back and played in the group stage of the Champions League in the two matches in Cairo and the one in Pretoria against Sundowns. He was one of their best players in attack. He's certainly a focal. He's a very hard runner. So yeah, I mean, the coach ultimately has to make a choice on who he thinks can do the job for him. But that statement that he's not good enough, it demotivates a player for one thing.
Okay.
Who you would think is on the fringes, and it's I think a strange statement.
Okay, the list also has a majority of Mamelodi Sundowns player. They have the highest number in the squad than any other club in the world. After 10 of them made it to the final squad list. But these Mamelodi Sundowns players have got some very, very tight fixture to end football for 2023. These are the same players that are playing in the CAF Champions League. They've played games in the inaugural Africa Football League. They have games to play, fixtures, waiting in the South African PSL. But these are the same players that will also apply the trade for South Africa when the African Cup of Nations begins. Coach Bruce has got a bit of a problem here, having to manage players who are already fatigued. Don't you think, Marc?
So, Onyinyechi, you're grilling me with some good, tough questions here. Yeah, absolutely. I think I think you have a point, especially when you look at Sundowns, who've been on a really they were on an 11 match winning streak in the league, but they're playing across 6 competitions this season because they're playing in the African Football League. There are 3 domestic cup competitions. There's the league and there's the Champions League. And they won the African Football League. They reached a final of one of the cup competitions. They've played a staggering 30 matches in the first half of the season in South Africa. So absolutely, there are those issues. Look, I think Bafana Bafana has to be built around Sundowns to a large extent. And actually, there could have been a few more Sundowns players like Deriak, like Rivaldo Kutsia. But there is that concern about their fatigue. One thing about Sundowns is that even if they have tired a bit, and you can see it at the end of the first half of the season, they have a spectacular support staff. They always have, from the days of Pizza Mosimani now through to Rulani Mokwena, who and the conditioning staff. So this is one of the reasons they can just win across competitions the way they have, and regularly play in the group stages and regularly go to the knockout stages of the Champions League to win an African Football League, to come back and keep winning in domestically. I think the bit of a break that they're going to have, I'm sure some players will be given a bit of a time off before reassembling for Bafana in Stellenbosch in the camp. That will help the Sundowns players a bit to recoup a bit. I think there's a bit of a concern there. I think you're right, but I think the break will be just enough for them to recoup a bit. And certainly this Bafana Bafana has to be built around Sundowns. They're the one shining light of men's football in South Africa at the moment with their competitiveness internationally.
Of course, Bafana Bafana will be the team that's got more local-based players, domestic-based players in the squad than any other country in the world. In the first place, Marc, I got a bit concerned after Coach Hugo Bruce has cited concerns around budget and that he is not a fan of taking 27 players to a tournament. He has never been a fan to take 27 players or even manage 27 players in the tournament and then put 4 on the standby list. He has cited these budgets and him not being a fan of taking 27 players to a tournament as the reason why he opted for only 23 players to the African Cup of Nations and not 27 compared to other nations. Do you also align with his concerns? He's got budgets and him not being a fan of taking more than 23 players to a tournament. Do you align with his concerns of Hugo Bruce?
I wouldn't necessarily align. I think there's a concern that you could be disadvantaging yourself by not having the same depth as other teams around you.
Yeah, that was the reactions coming from football fans in South Africa.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of concerns. I think what we've experienced with Hugo Bruce, and I think in Cameroon they experienced a similar situation, is that he's a little bit of a law unto his own, and this has pros and cons. So in terms of picking a lot of young players, this has excited South Africans. There's not a lot of veterans, and he's really gone with the youth emphasis and introduced blood that a lot of conservative coaches wouldn't have done. And this has brought a bit of excitement around the squad, but also to use the word loose cannon, I wouldn't want to sound insulting, but that is kind of the feeling that there has been in terms of a lot of Hugo Broos's decisions. And the way he speaks and the way he ruffles feathers. And sometimes when he speaks and ruffles feathers in South Africa, it's actually been a good thing, because he's raised hard truths about South African football that a lot of people don't want to hear, and that is good. So again, there's pros and cons. It's a strange decision, and I hope, again, like the Lyle Foster, I hope it, and some of the other players omitted, I hope it doesn't come back to bite us. So what we're looking at is Bruce had the same sort of issues when he was with Cameroon of being a bit controversial. He won an African Cup of Nations. I don't think in South Africa we're thinking from the position of weakness that our national team has been for the last 2 decades. I don't think we're thinking we're going there to win the tournament. But we're hoping that this sort of maverick approach by Hugo Broos will work with his team. He's got a lot out of the youngsters, but there are concerns about the depth in the squad, and that certainly alludes to your point of the 27 players.
Okay, we're hoping that this does not come back to bite coach Hugo Broos having to decide to take 23 players instead of 27 players like other nations are deciding to do. We must remember also that players can get injured, Marc, and when they get injured, because you took 23, you won't have a replacement there at the competition. And you should worry when you have the most important player, the most vital player, get injured before the competition. We've been speaking to a football writer all the way from South Africa, Marc Strydom. Strydom, it's been an interesting conversation with you, and I'm wishing you a Happy New Year in advance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Merry Christmas. Apologies, I didn't give my festive season greetings to people in Nigeria, and Happy New Year, and I hope it's a great one. And good luck to Nigeria at the Afcon.
Thank you. Good luck to South Africa too, the Afcon. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.